Hello, welcome to the Ravit Show. Very happy to have Mike Tung as my guest today. He is the CEO of Diffbot, an advisor at the Stanford Statics Accelerator, and the leader of Stanford's entry in DARPA Robotics Challenge. Earlier in his career, he was a patent lawyer, a grad student in the Stanford AI lab, and a software engineer at eBay, Yahoo, and Microsoft. Mike studied electrical engineering and software science at UC Berkeley and artificial intelligence at Stanford. He's also a member of Forbes Council. Today we will discuss about his journey. We'll be talking a lot around knowledge graph. I was just talking to Mike backstage, and the things that obviously knowledge graph, Diffbot has done in knowledge graphs are immense. So would love to know more about knowledge graph. So feel free to ask your questions around that. We'll be talking around AI, ML, and much more. So, guys, feel free to ask questions to Mike. He'll be here soon. Just before having him here, I would just like to let you guys know that Mike was kind enough to offer and give away one T-shirt of Diffbot, and also not only that, but a lifetime subscription worth $3,800 plus for the winner today. What you need to do to enter the raffle, you just need to type hashtag Diffbot in the chat section, and trust me, we'll be bringing up a raffle and you'll be in for it. So whoever wins will announce the winner by end of this show. And also quickly, one last thing that I want to mention is, let us know where you're joining from, and have any questions for Mike, feel free to put it in the comment section. I can see Aditi already typing in Diffbot, so she has already started. I can see one entry is already there. All right, guys, without any further ado, let's have Mike. Hey, Mike, welcome to the
Hey,
Ravit Show.
Rabbit,
Such a
thanks a lot
pleasure.
for having me here. From joining from sunny Silicon Valley.
Amazing, superb. I was just telling folks about obviously the lifetime subscription that they can win from today's show. But what they just need to do is put a hashtag Diffbot and also a T-shirt from Diffbot, and also is letting them know about your background a bit and about the things obviously that we spoke about knowledge graph. I'm sure there are folks who would want to know and learn more about Diffbot and how you've scaled up the knowledge graph. So obviously to start this, we would want to know more about you. So can you please introduce yourself, Mike?
Sure, my name is Mike Tung. I would say, the longest time employee at Diffbot as the founder. So I was originally born in Taiwan and moved to the US when I was about 2 years old. I grew up sort of on the East Coast and lived in various cities there. I lived in Pittsburgh and Atlanta and in Gainesville, Florida, and Boston and in Tennessee. And I moved basically to the West to start a job at Microsoft out of high school. I was one of their youngest SDE, software developers, on the Windows team. I worked on early versions of the Windows cell phone products, as well as what became known as Windows Vista, which is like the internally called Longhorn. Um, and then I went to UC Berkeley, where I did a background in EECS, which is electrical engineering and computer science. And then I started at grad school at Stanford in the AI lab, doing my PhD, although I didn't complete that. I follow kind of a typical Silicon Valley trope of dropping out, stopping early to do a startup. During grad school, I did a lot of hustling. So I worked as a patent attorney, helping people write patents. And I was able to make some good money doing that. So I got good enough where I could basically write a patent over the course of a weekend and make like 20K, be kind of good on rent for a while. I also,
Wow.
one of my faculty members, professor at Stanford, in a very typical, I guess, Silicon Valley way, is on the board of all these startups. And he asked me, pulled me aside from his class to join the startup that he was on the board of. And that was called The Find. It was basically a product search company. And I was the founding engineer of that company, and it was many years sold to Facebook. And then I was also the founding team member of a startup called Click.tv, which was a video streaming service, actually, which we sold to Cisco. And that became the Cisco Media Solutions Group
Mm-hmm.
in San Francisco. And then kind of in between, I worked as a consultant at Yahoo, helping them mine their search logs, and also worked at eBay, helping them also build up search. So my expertise, I would say, is basically in building search engines, and it's in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And in grad school, I came up with one of the algorithms that analyze protein sequences, like analyzing the sequence of those proteins.
Wow.
So I'm very, very into like data mining. I consider myself basically like a machine learning engineer at heart. And yeah, and that's when I started Diffbot, and so that ends my bio and brings us to the current day.
No, but this is quite a journey, Mike. And so, how many companies did you in total are were a part of the founding member?
Two,
Three, two.
two
Yeah.
companies, basically Defined and Click.tv. And I was
Wow.
basically like the founding engineer, kind of the guy writing the code and creating the IP. Diffbot is the first company where I'm sort of the CEO, the guy running
Wow.
the company.
So, how's the journey been? How is it different back then and now being the CEO? Because there are, or you obviously have to wear multiple hats being a CEO. So, what would you say is different being a CEO than being a founding engineer there?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had to go through quite a bit of my own learning journey, right, to become the CEO of
Yeah.
Diffbot. Because if you think about my background, I basically started out at the beginning of Diffbot as basically a grad student, right, coming from a very technical background. I didn't know the
Right.
first thing about raising over $10 million or like hiring world-class talent or building up like, a sales and marketing operation, like doing enterprise sales and hiring and retaining people. So I sort of had to kind of, as you say it, you're kind of building the airplane while it's in flight, right? You kind of had to learn on the job.
Exactly. So it is definitely. I'm sure it might have been. There might have been many decisions which might be you might be dicey about and how difficult it would have been. But definitely here you are making a company which is super profitable, and definitely would want to touch that base. Since it's how would you like in which category would you put your company in? Is
Mhm.
it ML based company or a AI based company for our audience?
Yeah, I mean, let me start out with just like what's the vision and purpose of Diffbot, right? Because I'm
Yeah.
sure maybe not everyone in this chat has heard of our company before. We'd like to think maybe they have, but it might not be the case. So I mean, the vision and purpose of our company is to try to build a complete map of human knowledge, right? We want to build basically a structured database, kind of crawl the web and build a public database, a public common resource of human knowledge, right? So think about all the books in the library in the Library of Alexandria. They're all basically just like gathering dust, right? You can't use the knowledge that's inside all of those books, right? So I came to this realization when I was young, and I actually read through and completed reading an entire library that I'll never be able to read all of the world's books. So the only way actually we can build a
Right.
system that can maintain all of human knowledge is to build an AI system, to build a
Wow.
machine that could read all of the world's knowledge and then and index it in a useful way so that all of the applications can leverage and become intelligent, right? We all
Mm.
love these movies, about sci-fi in the future, and in all of these movies, there's some intelligent agent, right, that has basically read the entire internet and it's able to communicate with you as a human being because it has the world's knowledge, right? So it was very important to
Exactly.
me that since we're going to build essentially this self-updating Library of Alexandria, that it be around for the long term, right? It can't be something that you just build it to basically flip, and then it basically screws over everyone that built on top of your platform, that built their application on top of this core library of structured knowledge, right? So it was
Hmm.
Diffbot didn't really start as me, really wanting to like build a startup or anything like that. It was really me wanting to fulfill this mission. And I think the
Wow.
best way to fulfill a mission like this and to organize a whole group of talented individuals is via a company. That's kind of the best way we figured out as human beings to cooperate in large groups, right? So it was very important to me from day one because I had seen, think about, late 2010s, early 2010s, many startups actually tried and failed to build this vision of a map of human knowledge, and they all sort of had this pattern
Right.
where they raised a whole bunch of funding and VC capital, And then they brought a bunch of talented people together. They were not able to build a sustainable business, and they had to either fold or they had to sell or be acquired by a bigger company, right? And
Yeah.
basically the project ends at that point, right? So it was important to me from the very beginning that we build a sustainable business. And so the way I thought about it first in terms of de-risking this idea is let's try to build the core algorithm first, something that can read
Hmm.
a web page and convert it into structured knowledge. So I spent maybe the first year and a half of this project basically just sitting in a dark room working on math problems, trying to come up with an algorithm that could very accurately, with high precision and recall,
Right.
look at a page, classify it, and convert it into structure. So I launched this API that did this on Hacker News, which is a kind of a popular, kind of aggregator site.
Yes.
And it was number one on Hacker News for basically like a day and a half. A
Wow.
bunch of engineers started signing up for it. And then some of those engineers work at popular big tech companies. One of them was at AOL, one of them was at StumbleUpon. And then they just started using that API at their work and incorporating it into their products. So I launched that as basically a paid API from day one. So basically for like a fraction of a penny, we would analyze the page you give us and we would
Right.
convert it to structured information, right? And so you would only pay us if it was good, high quality, right?
Exactly.
And so it was sort of profitable from day one because you just need one server basically to operate that kind of service, and
Right.
each request makes money basically because the kind of marginal cost of serving that is just bandwidth and electricity, right?
Right.
And so I write more about this on a post on my LinkedIn if you're curious. But basically, from that service, over the course of many months, people send us billions of URLs each month. We make a fraction of a penny on each request. After 50 months, we have 50 billion of the most popular URLs in the web already
Wow.
analyzed. And then so we only had to add a little bit of extra crawling in order to complete a complete crawl of the internet.
Hmm.
And that's when we hired and brought in this one really talented guy who I could talk more about, but Matt Wells, who's the founder of a search engine that had actually competed against Google before in the first
Wow.
search wars. And then when we added his technology with ours, we were able to do this full web scale analysis of the web using machine learning.
Wow, this is fantastic. I think it's the vision where it started till date. You've been very thorough about what you want, and that makes a lot of sense. In terms of building the Diffbot as a brand. Also talking about Diffbot, we have a question from Aditi. Hey Mike, how did you come up with the name Diffbot?
Yeah. So Diffbot basically just stands for a different kind of robot. I also think about human beings as a Diffbot too, because the way the human mind works is we notice the differences between things, and that's how we
Right.
perceive our reality.
Exactly. That's amazing. Good backstory there, Mike. Also, obviously, I want to jump right in the knowledge graph and want to know more about, how you can let us know in brief about knowledge graph, how are AI and ML used to build these knowledge graphs. It would be interesting to hear from you.
Sure. Yeah. So for those that aren't familiar with that word, right, the knowledge graph, they might have heard of the Google Knowledge Graph, which is that like panel that shows up on the right side when you do a Google search, right? That
Yes.
that was basically from a startup that Google bought called MetaWeb. So they basically built this, knowledge graph from crowdsourcing. So they took like Wikipedia, and they had this crowdsourced labor pool that would update these entries. And so you notice like a high percentage of the time at the very beginning that Google Knowledge Graph panels primarily were kind of like Wikipedia kind of entities and celebrities. What a knowledge graph is basically a graph. So it's a set of nodes and edges, right? The nodes are what we call entities. So entities are people, places, things out there in the real world, right? Like
Mhm.
that cabinet behind you, that desk you're sitting at, the city that you're
Right.
in, the human that I'm talking to. These are all entities. And then the edges are the relationships, also called properties, between the entities, right? So Mike Tung, me as a person, works at Diffbot, the company. There's an employment relationship. That's and then a knowledge graph is basically thinking
Right.
about, okay, how do you encode all of the world's knowledge in that
Hmm.
representation? And so what was your question again about how we build the knowledge graph, right? So
Right.
the way we build it is basically we have algorithms that crawl the page, crawl the web, not unlike Google. So besides Bing and DuckDuckGo, we're the only other US company that does a full web crawl. And then for every page, we use machine learning to categorize the page. So is it like a person page? Is it an organization page? Is it a product page? Is it an article page? Is it an event, a place? It does it automatically. And then given the type, let's say it's a product page, then it extracts the relationships or attributes between that product and other entities. So what's the product's price and SKU and brand and color and fabric and so forth. And then these are all organized basically and kept up to date by this, autonomous system. That's currently the world's largest knowledge graph, has well over 1 billion entities and 1 trillion facts or relationships, and generates about 150 million net new entities every month as it crawls the web.
Exactly. So how big is the team at Diffbot, Mike?
Yeah, so all of this is done with a team of less than 40 people.
Oh my God.
And primarily machine learning engineers, I would say, in our company. Yeah, including myself, of course.
But just less than 40 people doing so much work, or is it more of the automation that comes in when we talk about knowledge graph, or how does it work?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a lot of people at your AI company, there's probably not a lot of AI, right? So I think it's basically very highly leveraged work. And a lot of people that join the company are amazed by just the level of talent density that we have at Diffbot, right? So we may not have like the absolute amount of people and talent of a Google or Microsoft, but just like if you look at pure density, the 5 people around you, it's one of the most talent dense places that exists in Silicon Valley, and certainly like I would say the best place in the world to work on knowledge graphs and automated knowledge graphs. So every person on the team is basically like a world-class person that has invented a technology in their area of expertise. I'm sort of like the least qualified person at Diffbot because I was first and hired. Every single person has been like a step up from me. So yeah,
This is amazing.
I'm underqualified.
But that's obviously I can now imagine why less than 40 people making such huge strides by at Diffbot. It is fantastic. So also, since we are talking a lot around knowledge graphs, I would and I'm sure the audience would also love to know more applications of knowledge graph. Where is it applied? How does it work? Who are your clients? And what is it basically used for?
Yeah, so think about any kind of intelligent experience or application. What are like the main ingredients that go into that, right? There's the hardware, the software, and the data, right? And where Diffbot helps with is in providing data to enrich that application's intelligence, vis-a-vis its knowledge of the world, right? So if you look at our customer base, it's quite broad and horizontal, right? When you're providing knowledge as a service, as you might imagine, right? So we have people building consumer applications using Diffbot, and we have people building enterprise or business applications, using our knowledge. And if you think about consumer, we have basically some major search engines that use Diffbot, including, for example, DuckDuckGo and Bing, and like e-commerce search engines like Amazon and Walmart. And then we have a bunch of consumer apps that use Diffbot. So the first well-known app was actually Instapaper that used Diffbot. So it would, when someone Instapapers an article, it's Diffbot that analyzes that web page, converts it into the clean text of the article, and that's what shows up in your Instapaper, like on your Kindle device. There are all kinds of different like product pinning apps. So there's apps like Honey that do like comparison shopping. There's like a wedding planning app called Zola, where if you add a link to a product, it's Diffbot that extracts the image and price and brand of that product that builds your wedding registry. So that's powered by Diffbot. So there's also Newsbreak and Smart News, like these reading apps that are powered by Diffbot. These are all essentially like consumer apps that use the knowledge inside their applications. On the business side, there's a whole bunch of content marketing. There's PR and sort of like brand mentioning and brand monitoring companies that use Diffbot. So Cision, probably the world's largest PR company, uses Diffbot to help monitor the web for structured information about things and topics. There's people that use it for sales and marketing. So using it to find business leads. So you can query the knowledge graph and say, hey, give me all of the companies that are within like, the APAC region that have between 100 and 200 employees that's sell in my industry. That's a very specific kind of query that Google won't be able to answer that query for you, but the Diffbot knowledge graph will, and give you basically all the leads in your entire market space, right? So that's just one example of business, but you can
Yeah.
imagine there's security, there's you know, better market intelligence, you know, better analyzing the customer feedback. So like brands like Nike can actually use Diffbot to find like the counterfeit Nike shoes because we can tell them exactly where they are on the web. We can actually parse the
Exactly.
reviews and tell them like what they like and don't like about a new model that's produced. So all of this helps them, you know, connect with the outside world, you know, and the organization. The Diffbot becomes basically like another sensor, you know, to the real world and helps them be more connected.
Wow, this is fantastic. I can only imagine the work that goes behind this and the stuff you guys are doing. But a quick question there. Since Diffbot is definitely more inclined towards knowledge graph,
Mhm,
is it also in terms of obviously the application, what I'm trying to frame here is the application also useful in the cybersecurity world,
mhm,
where there are obviously Twitter feeds that come in which
mhm,
are obviously fake. Does
mhm.
Diffbot also play a very important role there?
So actually, blogged recently in our blog post about there's a whole bunch of academic research that's powered by Diffbot. And last year, actually, at some top security conferences like Usenix,
Hmm.
there are researchers that use Diffbot to actually analyze how cybersecurity advice is like consumed, and they were able to use Diffbot to like make recommendations on like improved cybersecurity practices.
Hmm.
So that's like one example of an application of security for Diffbot.
Wow.
Other ones are basically things like um, helping you fight terrorism, helping you identify if there's any objectionable content or people like plotting terrorist plots is something that you can use Diffbot to do as well.
Hmm. Definitely, I think it it does make a lot of sense if Diffbot is actually being used in multiple industries, and obviously being terrorism being one of the most important thing out there. So yes, great stuff there, Mike. Also, quickly taking a few questions that I can see in the audience. A question from Harshada. What are the restrictions you face when crawling? How do you get over the captcha gateways?
Well, so Diffbot doesn't try to do anything to get over CAPTCHA gateways. The way that we crawl is identical to the way basically like other major search engines crawl, like Google and Bing, and so we crawl the public web, and we crawl using basically like a real browser. We basically have like a run the browser in a virtual machine. Crawling the web and building a search engine these days is much harder than it was at the early days of the web, like when Google and Bing first started. And maybe that's one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of competition, in the search engine market these days, because the bar has raised so much. The web is
Right.
thousands of times larger than it was right in the 90s. Um, but we playing the web, sorry, like just crawling the web, some people might not realize is there's a lot of interactivity in today's web that didn't exist in, if you remember the early web, right, of the 90s and 2000s. It was mainly like these like flat text file kind of pages. Today's web is more like a video game that you play, right? I saw someone ask about reinforcement learning too. So you actually have to view crawling the web like a bot playing a game, like go to the next page. On a product page, there may be like multiple tabs you have to click through just to see all the product details. To read an article, you might have to scroll down, you might have to click to read all 10 pages of the article and then concatenate all those pages together to form an article entity. The same for like a comment thread. You might have to like paginate through
Wow.
like 10 pages of comment, right? So it's really like a video game. There's like up, down, left, right. You have to do to see the web, and without seeing the web, you can't analyze it. And there's also things called like spider traps and things on the web. Think about every time on a web page you see like a calendar widget, right, with the current calendar. Well, you could keep clicking the next button on that calendar, and since time doesn't end, that calendar will just keep going on to infinity, right? So how does your crawler not get stuck in like an infinite loop, just continuing to the page through that infinite calendar widget? So
Wow.
you have to be able to detect like endless loops in the web graph and recursion and things like that. You also have to think about how there's questions about like these challenges when crawling, or you have to think about not revisiting pages, right? Obviously, you want to go to like CNN.com, Reuters.com much more often, right? Than maybe like maybe than my own personal blog, right? Or some small like kind of niche blog. And so
Right.
that you have to use machine learning algorithms to predict like when is the optimal frequency to revisit and when might that page change. So you have to kind of predict the future to know, okay, I need to check this in 5 minutes because I know there'll be new content there, right? And so that's also a big challenge when designing a web scale crawler. It's also quite a lot of massage storage and compute. So we run our own data center. We have
Mhm.
thousands of nodes that have to coordinate this crawl with each other. So they all have to like kind of keep the state of the crawl in sync in order to do that.
Amazing. I'm sure Arshada is happy with that answer and she knows more about crawling now. So, thanks for that answer, Mike. There's another one that I would love to pick, but before that, obviously, I would want to know, according to you, what are the changes that AI will bring in 2022 or in the coming years? What's next?
Oh wow. Well, I think so. I think what you see with AI generally, the trends that are coming is you saw kind of an initial hype with like deep learning spurred by computer vision, and then the last 5 years you've seen like kind of a spurt in natural language processing, right? That's kind of
Right.
AI is becoming good at two human senses: the ability to see and the ability to hear and comprehend, right? Um, and um, what's and then we sort of had this like kind of long reign of like deep learning, right? These systems that get ever deeper, ever able to handle more parameters, right? Recently, yesterday, just released another benchmark breaking large language model.
Mm-hmm.
So you're having these systems that are able to very deeply model both natural language and vision, and very deeply predict and kind of generate that. I think what's coming next is the ability for AI to be able to explain its predictions, right? So it's not a black box and it's able to interact with people. In
Mm-hmm.
order to explain its predictions, it needs the explicitly encoded knowledge in the system so it can explain why it's making the predictions it's predicting. And to do that, I think we need to inject knowledge into AI systems, right? And so that's why you're seeing knowledge graphs rise as a big trend. I'll give you an example. Like if you've ever used like Netflix or Spotify, and you
Mm-hmm.
go to the main page, it's a page of recommendations, like what you should
Right.
listen to next or what you should watch next, right?
Exactly.
And the kind of recommendations Netflix recommends are knowledge-based recommendations. So it says, hey, you should watch this movie because you like movies with a strong female heroine lead, right? Or you like movies that have a surprising twist to it, or you like
Yeah.
movies that have this actor, right? So there's a reason why it's recommending and putting it there, and that reason is because Netflix has a deep movie database and a knowledge graph of all of the actors and movies and what was the kind of the mood of each movie. And so they built this structure that allows them to explain predictions.
Wow.
Ultimately, that allows you to trust the system more because it's not just a black box. It's not saying, hey, you should watch this movie because it has a 0.56 relevance score, right? Like Google's results, right? It's just ranked, right? Um, but it's giving you like a reason why, like a human would. It tell you like why you would want to watch it. And so I think that's really like the next generation, like systems that can explain. The systems
Mm.
are probable, right? More and more, you need to be able to you need to be able to audit the system and say like, hey, maybe some of these predictions are not good, right? Like you shouldn't discriminate against people, and so there needs to have some way to inspect the system, right? And that all requires being able to provide knowledge so that it can come from services like us, but also the human operator can put the knowledge into the AI.
Wow, this is amazing. And I was just wondering that it's only the algorithm which brings those recommendations, but not only just the algorithm, but there goes a lot of feeding in the AI. And definitely that's how AI is responding to humans as well, and actually bringing up something what they are liking. And knowledge graphs helps them to get those through. So fantastic explanation there, Mike.
Yeah, I would say today's systems, in my view, are actually not so intelligent, right? Like you talk to your Siri and Alexa, and you don't consider them that smart. And
Yeah,
the main reason you don't is because they don't have knowledge, right? And so they just, if it's not, hasn't been pre-programmed in, then it'll say, sorry, I can't help you with that. Like, here's
exactly.
something to read on your own and gain the knowledge yourself, basically, right?
Still, yeah, a long way to go, definitely. But in the coming years, as you mentioned, it's going to be something which will be more responsive, and it will actually be more interactive. So makes a lot
Mm-hmm.
of sense there. Okay, quickly taking another question. Oh, Kate is here. Hey, Kate, nice to see you as well.
Okay.
Uh, okay. Um, a question from Manisha. Where do you see knowledge graph going in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, it's a great question. So there's definitely been a lot of hype. So Gardner, one of
Yeah,
these firms that kind of track this hype, right, have put knowledge graphs at the peak of the hype cycle.
exactly.
Um, so, I mean, I think people have seen what big tech companies and these kind of like tech leaders have done with knowledge graphs, right? Like Google, Netflix, I just mentioned, Spotify, Uber. When you're buying something off Uber, it's using a knowledge graph to make the predictions between restaurants and dishes. So I think the business world has taken a note of that, and they want to use knowledge graphs in their business processes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're kind of struggling to build this in house. This is what I've seen. We work with a lot of these big companies as well. Um, so what you'll see is people trying to use this technology inside, large businesses, and they'll need a lot of help. They'll need a graph database, of course, something like a Neo4j or a Tiger Graph. They'll need a cultural alignment in their company in order for people to agree on what is the standards of the
Mm-hmm.
information, and how do you put information into the company's knowledge graph. How do you consume the information? So there's those kind of issues to work out. And then I think a big part of it is you'll have to integrate with an external knowledge graph, because no matter what the information is within your company, you're going to be referencing public entities. You're going to be, your customers are publicly referenceable entities, and human beings just can't maintain all that information. So I think a key ingredient is the integration of knowledge graphs, meaning you have
Mm,
a corporate internal knowledge graph. Some people might call that, the ERP or the CRM or
yeah.
whatever kind of, enterprisey database. And then you'll have these big and growing external knowledge graphs. And you'll want the best of both worlds. You want to be able to combine the internal and external information and sync in the external information down into the internal in a privacy compliant, data respecting way. And that's going to
Wow.
create basically like this industry of like, how do you keep the data up to date? Because everyone knows it's been working in a big company, the CRM's like always out of date or stale or
Mm,
has poor or low quality data, and that's because it's maintained by human beings,
right.
right? And which are error prone, and it's hard to coordinate everyone to agree to like the same standards. This is why we need autonomous systems to do this.
Amazing. That was an amazing answer, Mike, and a great explanation. Great question as well, Manisha. Thanks for that question. Okay, Mike. My next question, I'll just put shift a bit towards obviously data as well. Is data the fundamental reason AI succeeds or fails?
Mhm.
What are your thoughts?
Well, so I think there's basically three reasons AI succeeds or fails. And by succeed or fail, I just mean the AI system does what it's designed to do, meaning it's able to be accurate and complete, and has high precision and recall. It's able to actually successfully automate something, right? That's what it means to succeed. And the three ingredients are basically advances in hardware,
Mm,
so clock cycles, CPUs and GPUs and TPUs, right? That's what's driving AI to be more accurate. The second thing is the availability of better algorithms. So it's the fact that top research universities, right, like both in the U.S. and abroad, and also top commercial research facilities are constantly producing better models and algorithms and publishing papers. So we're better able to take advantage of the information we have. And then the third thing is availability of data, of course, right? And the internet, which is basically the largest repository of information that exists. The internet is also very special because it's also the information that's biased towards what people care about. And that's what they publish on the internet. It's not just
wow.
like sensor data, right? If you have
Yeah.
a sensor pointed at a patch of the sky, it may not have exactly what people care about, right? Or a sensor like in a forest, well, oil pipeline might not exactly be capturing. It might be more noise, right? But the internet's very high signal, right? because it takes effort to create content, as you know, to put information out there, and so it has to be what people care about. So if those three ingredients are basically, I think, what's driving AI. And if you think about the first two categories that are hardware, you
Mm-hmm.
have massive, billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies, right, like Intel, NVIDIA, AMD, pushing that envelope, right, and then a next gen of chip companies building TPUs. So, and then if you think about software and algorithms, you have massively funded, government-funded research institutions, right, like Stanford, where I came from, or Berkeley or MIT, and then, in the corporate world, you have like Google AI Lab, DeepMind, Facebook AI Lab, and
Right.
so you have massive resources basically going into research and better algorithms. What you don't have is an everything store of knowledge and data. You have these
Mm-hmm.
corporate companies that are building their own knowledge graph, but they're largely keeping it to better their own products, right? They're not
Very true.
democratizing it really and allowing anyone to benefit from it. And that's where Diffbot, we feel like, is like an opportunity in the market. We can be that company that's providing the knowledge graph for the world, that lets
Exactly.
even a student or someone with just a bright idea, they can compete now head to head on the same playing field as Google by just importing a knowledge graph that we have that's 100x larger than Google's knowledge graph.
And you've actually opened it for public, so that makes
Yes.
so much
Mhm.
sense there. Thanks for that explanation, Mike. Obviously, I would want to pick one question from another Mike who has joined us. So Mike Nash
Nice.
is here. Does Diffbot have APIs for Snowflake or Data Robot for advanced data rich AI apps, or is this in the pipeline?
Yeah, great question. So Snowflake, right, is like a cloud data warehouse, and Data
Right.
Robot, is like a data science company. They have a platform now. I think, but it was founded, I think, initially by a group of Kagglers. So Diffbot is used in a whole bunch of different data pipelines, as you might imagine. We at Diffbot, we only have less than 40 people, so we don't like ourselves maintain and build integrations for all of these various things, but we have a very easy to use REST JSON API, right? You basically query Diffbot in the Diffbot query language, very easy to learn. You can learn in less than 1 minute on our website. You can go there and there's like a free plan you can sign up for, and it gives you a trial access, and then there's like a tutorial you can follow. Within 5 minutes, you'll know how to query Diffbot. So we have an easy to use query language and an API that returns back JSON, and then the community has basically built 30 plus different like libraries and connectors. It can plug into things like Zapier and Segment, and it can
Wow.
be used in Power BI and Excel and Google Sheets. We have integrations for those popular business tools. So you can pull in Diffbot data, knowledge graph data into your Excel spreadsheet to enrich your tabular data. So we don't have those for Snowflake and Data Robot, but yeah, we're welcome to support you if you're willing to build one. So we would happy to help you make a
Amazing.
connector for that.
Awesome. Nice question, Mike. Okay, there's another question here from Pragyan Smitha. Okay, I hope I pronounced her name right. Would you consider knowledge graph and casual inference related?
Definitely related. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways I could approach this question, but I'll just keep it short and say, like, we use a grab bag of lots of different techniques to build the knowledge graph, out of everything from supervised learning to unsupervised to semi-supervised learning, to explicit logical reasoning and logical chaining in the process we call knowledge fusion. That relates to another question I saw, which is like, how do you actually combine information from multiple sites to arrive at the truth, right? Because you
Yeah.
want the knowledge graph filled with high quality facts, right? So that's where topics like causal inference, that line of research are highly relevant. And we think underexplored. So we would love to have more people in the academic community study causal inference and what we call knowledge fusion. And so at Diffbot, we also have a program where we give access to the knowledge graph to a bunch of academic AI labs. There's about a dozen or so there that have direct access to the Diffbot knowledge graph, and they've used
Hmm.
that to publish a lot of free and open academic research using it. Because if you're a promising grad student that wants to do research in this area, it's actually quite hard to do it without access to the data in academia, and Google doesn't give access to their web index to
Right.
researchers. and we actually do. So we're trying to unblock researchers so that they actually continue to stay in academia and fruitfully push the state of the art where they are.
Amazing. That's that's a great answer. And Mike, we have LinkedIn user. Maybe I know who it is. Maybe it's Marcin, and you are definitely a keeper for AI. You have such amazing knowledge there. So talking about AI, definitely I have another question. What do you think are the reasons for AI projects failing? Like I've heard many speakers, many evangelists out there who have mentioned that maybe 70 or more percentage of the AI projects actually fail. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts about it, Mike?
Yeah. I think probably the biggest public failure is probably like IBM Watson. So and Watson Health, there's a lot that's been written about that you can read. And I think the largest reason is that it didn't work, so that it didn't actually achieve
Yeah.
the goal or stated design objective of the AI. And I think it proves that, especially when it comes to very difficult technical subjects like AI, they cannot be made successful just with marketing budget. You know, you can't
Hmm.
just like hype it up and put a bunch of Super Bowl ads and get a whole group of people together, and that will lead to success. They're fun. These are fundamentally hard technical problems that require a long time. We've been building Diffbot for over 10 years, so it
Right.
requires um, a lot of research, a lot of pushing the state of the art to where it hasn't gone before, right? A lot of natural language processing isn't that accurate yet. We're still not able to do a lot of things that humans can do. A lot of people underplay just how smart people actually are, um,
Exactly.
and and so I think one reason they fail is people have the wrong expectations for what a system can do,
Exactly.
because they are too bought into the hype, right? So you have to actually listen to the experts. You have to actually study the data yourself. You have to look at examples, right? Whenever we work with a new project, I think we've been involved in so many successful projects with our customers. Um, we don't just take their word, right, for what they want to solve. We said, give us some data, show us some examples. Let's build a simple
Right.
POC and test it on a small set. Let's prove the KPIs on that sample set before we roll it out into production.
Right. Okay, that's amazing. Mike, before we obviously take the next question from the audience, I would just want to remind folks that Mike has been kind and he's offered a T-shirt and a lifetime subscription for the starter plan of Diffbot. So if you wish to win it today, we already have like 23 entries. Go ahead in the chat, write hashtag Diffbot, and we'll be doing the raffle by end of the show, so you still have a chance to win the full access of Diffbot. And I can't wait to see who the winner would be. And obviously I've worked on the free version and I've seen how it works. It is amazing. I was just telling Mike backstage as well that Diffbot has created some amazing products, and I can't wait for what's next. But talking about Diffbot, obviously, I'm sure the folks also want to know more about it. So, can you tell us more about Diffbot? What's where did it start? What is it doing right now,
Mhm.
and the future?
Sure. Yeah. So I think I'll maybe describe what Diffbot's product actually is, which we haven't actually explicitly talked
Yeah.
about so far on this podcast. So um, basically there's three main ways. Actually, there's four main ways to use Diffbot today. We have this knowledge graph, right? So um, the first API that I mentioned was what we launched on Hacker News with, this ability to take in basically any page on the web and to classify and extract it. That's still around. So one thing at Diffbot is we never remove our products or deprecate our product. We think that's a very important principle, because we don't want to break our users. We
Wow.
have built this long track record, so we'll never shut down things. Sometimes when we even with large enterprise customers that are using like Amazon and Google, I would point out to them that we have actually a longer track record than AWS and GCE, and Diffbot has out-survived multiple generations of Microsoft employee and like Accenture employee. So we
Right.
are a trusted partner that doesn't deprecate or break software. You can So the first way to use Diffbot is you pass in a page. That's called the extraction API. It can extract an arbitrary page, and it's basically like it's the antithesis of
Mm-hmm.
web scraping. It's the opposite of writing a web scraper because you don't have to make any rules, which is what you do when you create a web scraper. You just pass in any page and the AI figures it out. So that's great if you have lots of URLs and you're doing something at scale. Crawlbot is basically if you want to use that technology on an entire site. You want to convert basically all of Amazon and Target and J.Crew into a database of all of the clothing and products that exist on those sites. You can basically start at the domain of a site, and Crawlbot will traverse that site and then convert that site basically into a knowledge graph. Yeah, so you're
Amazing.
showing the thing. So if you go to the products drop down, you'll see these four
Yep.
areas: crawl, extract, and extract. You can try right on the website. You don't even have to sign up for a trial. You can just put in a URL, etc.
Amazing.
The knowledge graph is basically what I've been talking about, where you can query our crawl of the web, right? So you can ask any question that can be posed in a very specialized way, the Diffbot query language, and you get back all of the entities that match your question. So that's where you can say, hey, give me, all of the companies that match this criteria, or give me all of the job posts that have this skill in it, or give me, all of the events that occur at this time and this place. And you can join and combine multiple of those entities in the same query. For example, you can say, give me all of the executives that work, or all of the founders that are female founders that have graduated from a top school that has founded a startup in the last year, where that startup is in SaaS. That's a kind of a query you can ask. And the fourth way is what you're showing right now, which is the natural language API. So this is basically exposing our core natural language understanding engine directly
Wow.
to you as the user. So you can basically paste in here any text that you find on the web. In this example, it's just kind of like a typical like corporate bio kind of text, right, from an About Us page kind of text. And you can see from that input, it generates a knowledge graph. And you can see the entities there. So these are the people, places, and things. You can see the salience and the entity-directed salient sentiment. And you see the facts, which are the edges of the graph. So Mike Tung being a position founder of Diffbot, Mike Tung being an employee of Diffbot. And you
Wow.
also have in that column the fact qualifier, so the temporality, which is very important in business applications, right? So I'm not currently at Stanford, but I am currently at Diffbot. I'm not currently at Yahoo. And so that time aspect is really important in a business application, which no other sort of natural language APIs really capture. Um,
Right.
so you can try that out. This also works in every language on the web. So you can see in the pre-canned examples, you can try Chinese or Arabic. But one unique thing about Diffbot, which differs than Google, is when you use Google, there's actually a different search engine for every language, right? So if you're French speaking and you query French Google, you're actually only searching the French web. With Diffbot, we
Yeah.
crawl the entire web and we build a single knowledge graph of all of human knowledge in a single index. So we unify all languages into a common set of knowledge. There is no separate knowledge graph for every language on the web. And
Wow.
you can see that if you pass in a text that's in a different language, it still generates a knowledge graph that is a language
Mm-hmm.
agnostic, that's not in that language. Um, so Ravit, if you want to click on select example, you can show the audience
Yep.
that there's a little drop down there. You can pick a different
Yep.
language, right, like Chinese or Arabic, and you can see what it does on foreign languages. A lot of our customer base is quite international, and I know the world is increasingly international. So being able to analyze all of the languages is very important.
Wow.
So you can see here like some Chinese text as the input, but you can see the output knowledge graph is not in Chinese. It's actually it's in entities, right? So it's these things that are nodes in the knowledge graph. It's just the Apple node here is the same Apple node as if the input was in English.
Amazing. This is super cool.
So
I'm
the
super.
natural language API is great if you have a set of documents you want to analyze, basically, right? Your
Mm,
input is not a web page, but it's, let's say, a bunch of PDF files, or it's a bunch of information, and your goal is really to like index that information to make it more searchable. So you can build an internal Google-style search and also connect it to the external knowledge entities.
wow. And okay, the news articles can also be graphed here.
Mhm.
Wow. This is superb. I what I've done is obviously for our folks to enjoy this. I have shared it with them in the chat. So guys, feel free to have a look at it, give it a trial, and for those who gets a lifetime subscription, you can learn more, play more around it, and definitely reach out to Mike to learn more about those things. So, what's with the starter plan? What can one access, Mike?
So the startup plan, normally it would cost $2.99 a month, and what
Yeah.
we're offering here is a lifetime subscription. So it's however you plan to live multiplied by $2.99 per month is it will be the lifetime value of that.
Exactly.
And what it includes is 250,000 credits. So what credits mean is basically the unit of amount of data that you can retrieve, and so you can basically build your own startup with that level of data access with the
Wow.
startup plan.
That's amazing. Okay, a quick question coming here from Mike. Amazing AI tech, Mike. With crawling the web, have you considered having your own search engine?
Thanks for the name suggestion.
Yeah,
So
Diffbot.
yeah, just between you and me, Mike, we do plan to compete against Google in the future and build our own consumer search engine. Um, I'll tell you the difference it would be between the Diffbot technology powered search engine and what the search we have today is that the main objective function would be to return factual and accurate information. So there would be no ads. The current business model of the major tech companies is kind of like mining the user, right? Not mining the information, and so it's and then auctioning that off, right, to the highest bidder, like these advertisers. Our products are all centered around our users pay for our product, and we provide value to the users and allow anyone to be a user. Um, and the main, I think, what's missing in today's search is that Google doesn't actually like try to read and understand the information and give you factual and accurate information. Like accuracy doesn't play any role in the ranking or in how information is presented. And in building a knowledge graph, accuracy is the main attribute that the ML system is
Right.
optimizing. It's all trying to fuse disparate sources of information and automate the process of research to produce accurate information. So a Diffbot powered consumer search engine would be one where you could ask it a question in any language, your native language, speaking to it, and Diffbot would tell you the factual answer to your question, and it would tell you why, and it would point you to all of the primary sources on the web that support that answer. It would give you its confidence in that answer, and if there's different competing theories, it would present them, and it would point all of those theories to its supporting original sources. And so it would
Amazing.
be actually an engine that helps you form your opinions and come to your own truth based on objective measures.
That's amazing. I'm sure Diffugil, as Mike mentioned, is coming soon, and the plans kind of look very strong, Mike. To be honest, because you have, you already have a vision where you want to take it, and what's it gonna look like. I'm sure there might be more changes over the time, but it's for a brighter future. So can't wait to see how Diffbot makes it going. And as Mike mentions, great insight, intelligent search based on accurate is a game changer. Amazing stuff. Okay, my quick question for you, Mike, is about the future of platform. You did mention a lot right now about it, but if you, how do you envision it in next 2 years? That you want to take it from year to year. I know there's a product which is coming, and I'm sure the if you would love to share it with our audience, happy to do that. Otherwise, definitely we will plan our 2.0 version for the product. But yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about kind of like the 2 to 3 year time frame, right?
yeah,
I don't know if we can launch our consumer search competitor in that time frame, but one thing I can tell you is the mission of our company is to try to build a complete map of human knowledge, right? And so what that means is Diffbot currently yet is not a complete map of human knowledge. We tried to focus on the most popular categories of knowledge, right? So much like Amazon is an everything store, they try to kind of like keep the most popular categories of products in stock, right? But you can't really like buy anything you want on Amazon, right? You can't buy a house, right? Or you can't buy,
Exactly.
like construction equipment or anything like that, right? Same thing with us. Like, people care about other people, they care about companies, they care about products, they care about articles. These are the top levels of types, entity types in our knowledge graph today. What you'll see us release and continue to push is more and more entity types that are also popular, like medical entities, events, legal entities, sports. These are all music. These are all things that humans care about and are necessary to build a completeness of knowledge. So we're just going to keep adding more and more types, kind of going down the list until we can confidently say, okay, most of the things that you generally want to ask about are actually reside in the Diffbot knowledge graph and are maintained and kept up to date by the AI system. At that point in time, where we have this sort of general completeness, then we can talk about building a consumer service that can answer all kinds of random questions.
Wow, amazing. I think the plan in the next 2 to 3 years looks very solid and looking forward to it, Mike. But definitely moving on, it's time for announcing the winner for today. Before I jump on to the last question, definitely let's bring in the audience. And for those who have participated, there are 27 entries already. So good luck. The winner will actually get a T-shirt and a starter plan of Diffbot, which is a lifetime plan offered by Mike. Thank you, Mike, for this amazing offer. Let's do the raffle for the audience. Here we go. Let's
Oh
see
wow,
who
this
the
is
winner is.
fancy. Did you
Yeah.
did you make this feature or is it part of the platform?
It's the part of the platform. StreamYard
Oh,
has been
okay.
kind to bring this up. Okay, Manpreet
Oh wow.
Singh is the winner. Manpreet, congratulations for winning a T-shirt and a lifetime subscription for Diffbot Starter Plan. This is amazing. Thank you very much, Mike. Manpreet, I'll reach out to you and we'll get your address to Mike, and we'll get the things rolling. Okay,
Yeah,
Mike.
congratulations. Yeah, can't wait to
Yes.
see what you build with it.
Yeah, exactly. Mike, to move on, obviously, my last question to you was around conferences and about where we can see DevBot next. First thing, obviously, do you visit? Are you planning to visit conferences? And what are your next marketing plans? Where can we hear you? Where can people reach out to you and learn more about DevBot?
We're still trying to figure out our event plan for 2022. But if you're curious about anything I talked about today, check out our products. They're very open and easy to use. You don't even have to sign up or provide any information to try out a lot of the things I said. And also, if there's anything I can help with personally, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you just need advice. If you're doing AI, using it in your job or a startup or trying to get into the field, feel free to connect with me. I would love to help.
Amazing. This was a super good session on Knowledge Graph. We've learned a lot, Mike, and it was fantastic talking to you. And also, a very thank you to our audience for having such amazing questions around Knowledge Graph.
Mhm.
So, definitely, we'll plan a 2.0 version with Mike when there are more developments around DevBot. That is definitely planned, but looking forward to it. Thank you very much, Mike.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me. I had a lot of fun.
All right. Have a nice day, Mike. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you. Bye bye.